Look at this, episode 23 of Inside the Game right here on One Soccer and the One Soccer digital and social platforms. It is the Michael Jordan episode. How cool is that? We finally reached the Michael Jordan episode, which is something else because, of course, Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time. So I'm assuming that this episode is going to be the best yet. No pressure to tonight's guest whatsoever. So it's an all-timer coming up. Gareth Wheeler with you, rounding out another week, and perhaps the final episode that we're going to do while I'm still in my 30s. Yeah, I got a big birthday coming up next week, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about this number right here. I much prefer 23, let's put it that way. But enough about me. The program is all about our guest, really, as we feature the biggest and brightest and most important personalities in football, with obviously a keen focus on the Canadian game. I've got plenty, and I mean plenty, to ask tonight's guest, who I've known for well over a decade now, and I have to say, we're looking better than ever. So let's get straight to it with a friendly reminder for you out there to subscribe and like and continue to follow our content at One Soccer. All right, so today, a true power broker in the North American game. And I love that term, by the way, power broker. And we've had a couple join us on this show, along with players and coaches, etc. But really, this man has his finger on the pulse of the Canadian game, helping to set the directive of where we are and where Canadian soccer is going. Before seeing the light of the great game of football, at least working within it intimately, he worked with Skate Canada and Canada Basketball as well before signing on as General Secretary of the Canadian Soccer Association. Back in 2007, or for the 2007 Under-20 World Cup, which was hosted to great success in our great country, he was a national event director. And really, our country, since he took over as General Secretary, has continued to grow, expand, and really the association has been providing an overarching, more professional approach to governance of the game. His first taste of the World Cup at the senior level came a decade ago. We were in South Africa as general coordinator for the host city in beautiful Rustenburg, setting him and his team really up for success in hosting other World Cups, including 2015, the widely successful Women's World Cup in this country, and leading the Canadian contingent as co-director of the successful United bid for the 2026 FIFA World Cup that's obviously going to be played in our very own backyard. These are difficult times. They are times of change, times of unknown. And this man certainly has his hands full, but without a doubt, it's reassuring that it is in his very capable hands and that of his team as well to take Canada soccer through this unprecedented period. We have plenty of questions to ask, so let's get straight to it. I want to welcome the great Peter Montopoli inside the game. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hey, thanks. I'm great, Gareth. I need you to do my introductions wherever I go globally. I would really appreciate that. That was very kind to you and very nice of you. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing well. Now that the nice weather's hit, you kind of get the itch to get back to normal, to get back in the fields and calling games. But other than that, we're hanging in and waiting patiently. I'm assuming your life right now with the Canadian Soccer Association is much more lively. It's probably much more all over the place, just kind of reacting, trying to plan ahead, then plan some more based upon what's being thrown your way.
Yeah. So what's happening is we continue to plan, and then we throw those plans away, and we create new plans, and it's an ongoing story on a daily basis. But we just can't lose focus of what we're trying to do, and certainly keep everyone healthy in our country.
That's obviously the priority. So how would you describe the past 3-4 months in your world, Peter, and that of the Canadian Soccer Association, as well as all the other member, federations within FIFA?
You talked about 2010 in Rustenburg, which was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I know we'll talk about it, but in the last 3 months, it's felt a lot of like that because things are coming at you from so many different angles and probably busier than you've ever been before. And there's still no football on the pitch. So it's hard to adjust that, what we were trying to do historically is the work we're doing generates something on the pitch, playing football. and there's no playing football, but you're still as busy as ever. So it's been hectic in that way for sure.
Yeah, I guess you need to lean on those close to you, those within your team, your family as well for support. Is everyone doing okay, Peter?
Yeah, everybody, family's great. Thank you very much. And everyone on our team, we meet a number of times in a week and make sure everybody's ready and willing to go. And we've started some new programs. I'm sure we'll talk about it during the course of the interview, but everybody's raring to go and everybody's excited, hopefully, for getting back on the pitch at some point in time.
Does this overall period give you some time to maybe sit back and maybe change direction a little bit? Because I mean, you're trying to keep up with the day to day and plan ahead, whether it's 2026 or something that's more in the immediate future. Perhaps it's time to just settle down, reflect, think, and come up with a new game plan. Perhaps new ideas are being brought forward.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happened. It's allowed our staff to rethink, what they are actually doing. So as part of, let's say, our media team, our communications team, we've had numerous webinars because our coaches and players have been available where historically
Yeah.
they're not available, right? It's not that, like they wouldn't want to do it. They would absolutely want to do it. But having a John Herdman available or Kenneth available or Rian Wilkinson available, a Robin Gale, I mean, they're all available and they're all doing webinars to assist the public and the people who are interested in our sport. And that part's been wonderful.
I love it. I was just having this conversation the other day. I hope that continues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I hope
Yeah.
that once everything's back up and running, that we take a little bit more time to hear these great soccer voices in our country.
Yeah, and great stories too, right?
Yeah.
There's some great stories you've heard, and we're doing podcasts with Jason DeVos. It's been really great. So we'll look to keep that up in some way, shape, or form for sure.
Awesome. It's funny. I have so much to ask you, but I want to get to something that I've always wanted to ask because typically when you hear people leading organizations, the term president's out there, vice president or CEO, general secretary. I think of the United Nations and I think of Canada Soccer. What exactly is the general secretary and what exactly do you do, Peter?
Well, that's a great question. As I tell my staff, I'm the very general secretary, and they all get a big laugh. And so, what the general secretary is actually the CEO of a company, and it is the European term. And where that assists us is when you're dealing with general secretaries from Sweden, Finland, Wales, England, your counterpart. So the title is more of a counterpart title, but anyone who's a general secretary is basically a CEO of a company.
So a lot falls on your plate. There's a lot in your portfolio. What's the most challenging aspect of your job or the most all-encompassing part of your job, Peter?
Well, you know what, Gareth, it's keeping a balance. It's really keeping that balance, and very much so many constituents and populations feel that their program is more important than the other program or this program and that program. And so, on a daily basis, you're dealing with domestic issues while dealing with international issues, while dealing with a coaching issue, with dealing with a staff issue, and dealing with grassroots issues. So you've got to prioritize, keep a balance of everything that's going on, but keep pushing the sport forward while you're managing the people below you and advising the people above you.
You've been in the role 12 plus years now, correct? I was right
Yes,
with that?
correct.
You came from a background, as I mentioned, Skate Canada and the 2001 World Championships, Canada Basketball as well. What brought you to Canada Soccer to begin with?
Well, the opportunity of 2007 FIFA U20 World Cup was too much to refuse. I played soccer as a youth. I enjoyed it very much, and I saw the potential of working at a FIFA World Cup, and the opportunity to be working with FIFA at the highest levels possible. And so that competition kind of brought me into the fold of what soccer was domestically, but it had that international component that I was excited about as well.
And what a way to get a taste like that 2007 World Cup, under 20 World Cup. I think everyone was kind of anticipating what may happen, like some generational talents played in that tournament. But of course, the centerpiece, BMO Field, and that dream, that reality of a soccer specific stadium coming to life. But I mean, more tickets were sold to that under 20 World Cup than any other previous other, or I believe any other under 20 World Cup since.
So,
I mean, Go ahead,
Yeah,
Peter.
I'd love to talk about it because it's the underpinnings of success of soccer in our country, not Canada's soccer, but soccer in our country. We set a goal to be the largest attended FIFA event in history outside of a men's World Cup, and we broke that record. We had 1.2 million in attendance. The second part of that is 1.2 million people paid. So a lot of people told me when I took the job that you're crazy to take that job. Nobody buys a soccer ticket in Canada. And I'm sure you've heard that many times over historically. They don't say that anymore. But that tournament changed the psyche and the perception of people in Canada to say, I'm going to pay for something of value. And the third piece that came about was, and I like to say it in this way, the tournament brought BMO Field, which is a national soccer stadium, which brought MLS. If anybody tries to tell you differently, and I know you've broadcast games from there and MLS, that MLS brought the stadium and brought the tournament, it's not true. The true aspect is the tournament, which was secured by Canada Soccer, predates me. And it's a credit to the organizing people at the board and Kevin Pipe, principally Kevin Pipe, who got the tournament. The stadium came because of the tournament, and then it was time to go get an MLS team. And thank God for MLSC for the wisdom they had to pony up to buy a franchise when people were saying maybe not, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. So those things happen because of the U20 tournament, and that's really the power of events, and that's why I get excited by the power of events, because it can change a country, and I think we proved that in 2007, leading into all the other competitions afterward.
It's funny you mentioned about paying for something of value, paying for soccer tickets. It kind of reaffirmed my belief, Peter, that people just want the real thing. They don't want half measures. They don't want to go part way. But that's why a professional team at the standard of MLS, that's why it worked in the city. That's why an under 20 World Cup with real talent, people are willing to pay for that. And I'm just wondering how much the Canadian Soccer Association and then you kind of taking over as general secretary, how much you learned from that event and kind of have used that experience to build your model moving forward.
Well, yeah, it was really the start because we felt like, okay, we had this gem that Kevin Pipe brought. And now, where do we build from it? And it was always the idea that the next thing that would come would be the FIFA Women's World Cup. And I think that was where, we needed to continue to build off 2007, which really built off 2002. And I haven't mentioned that predates me, but Canada made the final of the inaugural, what was called at the time the FIFA U19 Women's World Championship. It wasn't called the World Cup, it was a World Championship. We made the final. And that was the introduction of Christine Sinclair to the Canadian public. And we lost to United States that match. But no shame in coming in second. And that's really been our only medal at a FIFA World Cup. That had the largest attended youth women's, it was the largest attended youth women's match in history for FIFA. And that record of 45,000 people still stands to today. And it shows that people are generally very much interested in soccer. And as you said, interested in that product that is gold that we wish to be a part of. And that set the standard for 2007 and building towards 2015, which I know we'll get to.
Well, the 2007, and you can tell me because you can probably describe how this relationship works, but it just seemed like after that tournament, this connection between the CSA and FIFA, that relationship became that much more tight. You yourself, as I mentioned, you were in South Africa, as well as a contingent of Canadian people that helped administer that World Cup on the ground level. Would that be accurate to say that 2007 kind of took that relationship to the next level where there was trust in Canadian soccer and belief in what we were all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Credibility and respect was what we achieved in 2007. And not to say that it wasn't there before, but I think when you're setting records and you're seeing a youth event where the stadiums are sold out, that makes everybody in FIFA take notice and say, wait a second, there's something special happening in that country. And certainly for me personally, it led to the opportunity in 2010. And I want to personally acknowledge you, Gareth, because the people don't know this story, but being the venue general coordinator for the venue of Rustenburg, in South Africa is a far ways away. And there were very few people that came to visit. And you were one, my friend, that came to visit me in Rustenburg. And forever, I'll always appreciate that, for you taking the time to come say hello, visit me. We did an interview. I always remember that. It was hot, but you took the time to come to South Africa and visit me in Rustenburg, and I'll forever remember that as a great gesture on your part. Thank you.
That tournament was one of the best times of my life. One of the most hardest working times of my life. I was working for Sun Media at that time, and I was a one-man band. I was writing, I was doing video, I was editing. I did everything in order to go. And going up to Rustenburg to see you, that was my one day off. And I'm like, if I could go up, I need to chat with Peter and make something of it. But I went with a friend of mine that I met in South Africa, the 4.5 hour winding road, one-way trip from Johannesburg to Rustenburg, which is, it's way out there, isn't it? It's very isolated compared to the other venues.
Well, and now you know how I felt of being there for 40 days. You're really, in a way, stranded, but you're working, your tail off, really, from early morning to late at night, trying to make sure. You're worried half the time, you're not sure what's going to happen next. So when I saw your face, a fresh face, it was a big hug, and I felt very comfortable, and I'm forever grateful for that, Gareth.
Likewise, it was so great to see you there, and I saw the likes of Richard Scott over the course of the tournament as well. So friendly faces were always a good thing. And I remember the match to this day. It was a beautiful day. It was a 1-1 draw between Ghana and Australia. And the Aussies, like, they all were moving site to site, and they were camping out in cricket grounds, and they knew how to party. Like, they created an atmosphere in and around when I don't know if you felt that as kind of the most lively moment in Rustenburg, but the Aussies, they know how to kind of follow a team through a tournament.
You know what? I had so many great countries. I have to tell you, we had United States come through. We had England come through, and England was a team base camp. So I would go visit them every second day to make sure everything was okay. And I could safely say the tension that was in that camp at that time, because the expectation was through the roof. And Fabio Capello was a fellow Italian, and we would converse a little bit in Italian, but I could feel the stress level. However, it went away when it was that they made it through out of the group stage, and you could just feel all the pressure just left them. And when you went to visit them every other day, you could see the build up and build there, and they were really sequestered. So it was very difficult for them. We also had Mexico come through, and you know how the Mexican fans are. Yeah. It was some wild stories that came out of there. But from you, who came there, Joe Biden came as a vice president. I met Bill Clinton. He came, and we had Mick Jagger there. So we had a cross section, and the late Kobe Bryant. So we had a cross section of people coming and going. And an assistant coach for England was David Beckham, who was always telling me to do this. And I said, David, I'm not sure. I think you got to move away. We got this under control. So there was a lot going on, over a 40-day period. There's a lot going on. And my first match was England and United States. And so we had the equivalent of 300 million people watching that match, which is 3 times the size of the Super Bowl. And when I walked out on the pitch with the teams, I felt like, what am I doing here? This is out of this world. And like the light bulbs are going. It was a magnificent moment that I'll never forget, but it was scary in terms of the amount of pressure that's on an individual to run a venue, for sure.
You saw the Robert Green gaff up close and personal. It wasn't anything to do with the pitch, though, Peter. The pitch was pristine.
That's very good. Thank you.
I was in Bloemfontein when Germany, England, before pre-Hawkeye technology, Lampard off the ball. I remember sitting there, and the photographer right in front of me, because I'm like, it's in. Like, all the media around me were saying it's in, and he had snapped the picture, and he turned around, and this is before everything gets uploaded right away. He just went back and showed me the picture. So I saw before everyone else, it was a foot over the line.
Isn't that wild, eh?
Yeah. Amazing stories. I mean, the football in the tournament, in fairness, wasn't the greatest, but the atmosphere was top notch, and it was well run. What did you learn from being part of that event that you were able to bring with you to 2015 and that you will bring with you to 2026?
Well, administratively, it was a long list. It really helped me out to better prepare ourselves for the bid for 2015 and the eventual execution. But I think what I got out of it personally was when I was working with the volunteers and the organizing committee in Rustenburg, it was never an idea that look what we're doing for Rustenburg, look what we're doing for South Africa. It was always the idea, look what we're doing for a continent. And I think the people were so proud, and I always remember that idea that, Peter, we're doing this for our people, for the continent of Africa, and this is really important and we can't fail. So they put a tremendous amount of pressure on themselves, absolutely. But the idea that they were doing something bigger than for themselves, even bigger than their country, is for a continent, very powerful. So in actual fact, look what we're trying to do for 2026. We're trying to do it for our continent of North America. It's the same thing. Now, we're a little more developed, a little more experienced, but that puts more pressure on us that we've got to deliver on a promise of unity, certainty, and opportunity that's probably never been asked of anyone before. So I'm going to take a lot of those experiences of 2010, certainly of what it is that you're doing for a continent, and live and breathe and motivate our country and continent to be what we expect it to be.
I want to get more into 2026. We just experienced a 2-year anniversary from the winning bid being confirmed, but I think sequentially it makes sense to talk about the women's program and 2015 and what's come and played out since 2015. It's kind of funny because without Canada hosting that FIFA Women's World Cup, I'm not sure if the World Cup would be as grand as it is today. Like, France did an incredible job, but it went from a tournament, Peter, where really Canada was running almost all by yourselves for the
Yeah.
2015
Yeah.
bid. And they put on such a show when the women's game has grown so much that is now seen right up there, like right alongside the men, as an absolute marquee 5-star international event. What changed since 2015? Was it the way that Canada hosted the event? Like, what have you seen from your perspective, the way that event was run and where it's gone from there?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Again, we broke a record there. We said we were going to fill the stadiums. People doubted us, and we broke our record that we have of the largest attended FIFA event outside of a men's World Cup. So it's about 1.35 million, and that record still stands to today. I mean, we said to FIFA our plan is to sell out the stadiums, and it's a little difficult on the FIFA Women's World Cup because the people don't travel as much as they do on the men's World Cup. And you've articulated that earlier, where you saw the pockets of people from every country, right? Every country had those people, Australian, England. In the Women's World Cup, it's all internal, it's all domestic. Now, we were lucky, we had the United States, and United States, the people filled the stadium as well for their matches, but it's not like they were filling the matches,
Right.
the other 46 matches that we had to execute that didn't involve United States. We did that. We also did it in a time where there was a bit of upheaval at FIFA the week before the Women's World Cup. And so a lot of transition, and we were kind of left to our own devices to try and pull this together. And maybe in a way it worked, it helped us because we weren't hamstrung by any procedural. We needed to get the job done, and I think in the end we did. And I think we proved that again, women's soccer was incredibly important in our continent and incredibly important in Canada. And I think the thing that stands out to me even more so than 2007 is watching the images now. And TSN has been showing some of the matches, and during the competition you don't really get to see the matches, you're working behind the scenes. So looking at it again is when Canada's playing, I see red. And I saw red when I was there too, but it's a different. It was a different red than 2007. And Gareth, it was a different red because this is the last piece of the puzzle. When I talked to you about 2007, people paying to go watch soccer, and it was big crowds, right? And building a soccer-specific stadium for something, and now professional soccer. But the people who came in 2015 wearing red, they came in red wearing a soccer jersey. Our Canada soccer jersey. It's a big difference than wearing the Canadian Olympic Committee jersey or wearing a hockey jersey. And I don't begrudge anybody for wearing Canada Leaf, fantastic. But sometimes you want the people coming to your sport wearing your sport jersey. Yeah. And it was the first time I really saw a big connection between Canada Soccer Red and the general public supporting us. That was a big difference that we've seen transition to today. That's still there. It's a legacy. You don't write it down. You don't say anything. It's just visual. And that's cultural. The things I think I'm saying are cultural. Paying to buy a ticket, filling stadiums, and wearing a Canada soccer jersey, that might be given in Brazil, Argentina. That's a given. In Canada, it wasn't there. These events allow you that opportunity to change culture. You can't write it down. It just happens organically. And those things happened organically.
I just want, if you're going to cut it up like a pie chart, because there's a number of elements I think contributed to that. One, the pride of hosting a tournament of that magnitude. Two, the fact that the team was exceptionally popular. The women from Christine Sinclair all the way down, they were known in the country and they're likable. And three, you had a head coach that when you listen to John Herdman speak, you almost want to run through the wall for him, even if you're not even playing. So there was a lot of contributing factors.
Yeah, I think really it started, well, for many things, but in 2012, going through the highs and lows of the Olympics and winning that medal the first time in 76 years in Canada, a summer team sport winning a medal. It's pretty significant. And so it put everybody on the radar. And we had a marvelous, marvelous promotional campaign that Sandra Gage had put together in our office for the women's national team. And there wasn't an opportunity that we missed to promote or engage our women's national team in our Canadian public. And they're so well known now that they are the top women's team in Canada by far. It's not to take away from any other sport, but you know, they've won 2 medals in a row. They're very popular, and we have a standard to keep up to and to continue to invest in the women's game, that we continue to invest in that. And that's an outcome of the medals of 2012, 2016, hosting in 2015, putting our players in the NWSL, so creating a professional league. I know it's not in Canada yet. We'll talk about that. But it's creating a professional league that our women's players wanted to, because before they were unattached and they were not being paid to play. They got a salary by Canada Soccer to be a professional soccer player. And we created the NWSL, still there today. We'd like to think it's growing. This year's a difficult year, but it is a growth league now. It's not a startup. And I think it was one thing we're very proud of, that this league started from nothing to where it is today.
We'll skip back to some of what happened along the way, but I think it's a good time to transition to the current topic. And you kind of brought it up, the state of the women's game. There are people in this country, just like the Canadian Premier League was formed on the men's side, would love to see something similar on the women's side. In terms of dollars and cents, are we anywhere near a position where that can tangibly work, Peter? Or is there still work to be done, not only within this country, but globally in terms of the women's game? Because countries are now starting to pick up just in terms of quality, awareness, recognition, but it might take some time.
Yeah.
What's your read on the situation?
Well, you know what? The awareness and recognition is there. I believe we've done that. And the investment at the highest level. Now, we are investing at the lower levels for elite development. We're producing players. Look at Jordan Heidema coming through our program at 15, 16, starting now at 18, and going from high school to a pro contract at PSG. It's significant. What needs to happen, Gareth, is a collection of, or one, investment over and above Canada Soccer. I think Canada Soccer has taken the game, and I like what the discussion's been from 2002, 2012 medal, 2015 Women's World Cup, and we hosted 2014 FIFA U20, 2016 medal. It's now requires that next layer of investment over and above Canada. Canada Soccer can't invest in owning leagues. That's not our business. We don't own leagues. We don't own clubs. Now, we've done our fair share with the NWSL. I'd like to think that there's an ownership group that is willing for Canada to put in a team in NWSL, have a collection of our players as part of NWSL. Then does that mean that there's another league underpinning it? Potentially. But it's got to come with investment over and above Canada Soccer. Canada Soccer's doing our millions to keep the highest level going, and we're willing to support an NWSL franchise in terms of an ownership group supporting them. Not necessarily means financial. It means getting them in the game, which we have those relationships with NWSL. So it's got to come with financial investment. And I like to believe we're really close to that. And maybe COVID has delayed this to a certain extent, but I'd like to think we're closer than we might think.
Yeah, it comes down to dollars and cents, as do so many different things. You want to move forward with this because not only because it's progressive, it's the right thing to do, but you want to make sure that the business model is secure. So this isn't just a blip on the radar. So this is something that has longevity that can last. So you have a feeling that we're close, Peter. We're just not quite there yet.
Well, I think we're close at the highest level in terms of North America. If we're talking about an entire league, I think that's going to need a little more work, a little more development, to be honest with you. But if we're talking about starting, having one team at the highest level possible, I'd like to think we're closer than ever before, for sure.
Let's stay with the women's program. I'm not sure if you received my application in the mail for the women's national team head coach.
To be part of the selection committee or to be the coach? Which one was that?
Well, I was thinking that I could be a good leader. I'm not quite John or Kenneth, but I have my own endearing qualities, Peter. I, obviously, we were supposed to be moving towards the Summer Olympics where the Canadian women would have been featured prominently, one of the favorites in that tournament. Instead, there's a coaching search. Is there any kind of timeline on when you would like to see a coach in place for the women's program? Where are you at in terms of finding the next one?
So, we're going through a process that's transparent. Anybody like yourself can apply, no doubt about it. But I'd like to think in the July timeframe that we would have gone through the process and selected a coach, so that there's a bit of a transition with the new coach, with Kenneth. Kenneth will be here till the end of August, so they'll have that transition. And then, in place certainly for any FIFA windows that are upcoming. We'll learn, closer to the end of this week, if there are any FIFA windows this year remaining in 2020. Currently, they're scheduled for September, October, and November. But that, with COVID, we're not sure if anything has changed, and we'll learn from CONCACAF and FIFA very, very shortly on the FIFA women's window, and then that coach will take over during those windows. So that's the transition. It's a great project because it's not only 1 year, but they certainly have 3 great competitions in a very short period of time within 3 years. So there's 2 Olympics, 21 and 24. And a Women's World Cup in 23 that they'll decide very shortly in terms of who'll be hosting. I think Australia and New Zealand are the leaders so far for 23. So there's a lot of work there. It's a great position, and certainly we've had great interest in applications so far.
Well, it's a great job because there's so many very good up and coming players coming through. And like you said, big tournaments where Canada's right in the mix in each and every one of them coming up. So it's never easy to lose your coach, especially someone like Kenneth, who's been around the program for so long, Peter. Are you almost looking at this as a new opportunity, not to create something different, but maybe you can go in a little bit of a different direction? Maybe you want to see the program move in a different type of way. How are you approaching this search, you and the rest of the team?
Well, that's a good question. I think we're waiting to see what the candidate pool would be, and certainly there is an opportunity for this coach to take the team in a direction that it needs to go, and it's really up to the coach to look at it and see what the gaps may be as to where we are internationally. We're 8th in the world right now. Should we be lower in terms of closer to number 1? I like to think the talent pool, we all believe that. But it's a matter of playing the right fixtures. It's the right combination of players. It's just getting the right mix in there. And so it's certainly an opportunity for this new coach to review everything in order to have us ready for 21, but also in the back end, get us ready for 24 as well. And
I almost feel like the situation where Kenneth took over, and even whoever is going to be the next coach, John Herdman left such an indelible mark on the program. And just in terms of his approach and awareness and bringing the team together, he's left a legacy, hasn't he? And it's going to be very difficult for anyone else to recreate, or you almost need to approach maybe in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, so with John, a lot of people don't see. The first thing they see is who he is as a person. He's an outstanding person and motivator. He's also brought us 2 Olympic medals, which for our country is significant. But what he also is, that people don't see, he's a programmer. And what he developed was the whole Rex and Super Rex programs that are underpinnings to the success. And as he calls it, it's a conveyor belt. And we never really had that conveyor belt. We were working with different entities, but the conveyor belt was broken, and he created a conveyor belt that has worked and continued to work. And so, do we look to replicate that? Maybe not at that level, but certainly something maybe different at a national team level. A mix of older players, new young players, combination of, I think there's an opportunity there, because I think we certainly believe that while we're ranked number 8 in the world, there's the potential to be greater than that for sure.
It's funny because unlike other regions, and I was just thinking about this as you're chatting, Canada has to deal with a unique problem than any other women's nation in the world. They have to deal with that monster to the south, the United States, and just them being a machine. So is the goal to find that giant slayer? So, the US have been leading the way in women's soccer. You've seen Canada close the gap. It extends. It's varied. But are you looking for that giant slayer? Who can get you past the United States?
Well, that's a good question. It's taken us a very, very long time. But I don't know if it's one person. I think it's really the system, because United States is successful based on sheer numbers. It's their player pool is 3.5 million players. Ours is 350,000. There's nothing to sneeze at. We're third in the world behind the United States and Germany, so we're there in terms of participation. But they have such a player pool that 11 players out of 3.5 million. I don't want to say it's easy to do, but they have that opportunity to. So we've got to continue with our system and keep our system and our engine going to find the mix of the right balance in order for us to close that gap. It's a tough ask for sure, but it's not unrealistic as well.
I can see some point in the future, Christine Sinclair, player coach, I mean, she's meant so much in this program, right, isn't she?
Fantastic.
And when you think about 2020, the entire year hasn't been bad, because at least we got to celebrate back at the beginning of the year, Christine Sinclair becoming the best top goal scorer of all time in international history. I know that you have a long history with Christine, seeing you on the field with her, and you can see a level of pride there. What has she meant to Canadian soccer, not only within this country, but worldwide as well?
And by the way, you called that match and you called that goal brilliantly.
Oh,
congratulations on that.
It was quite the moment. It's not the best goal that she scored, but they all count. And the way that the team and the country and the sporting world, for that matter, rallied around her in that moment to celebrate that accomplishment, that was something special. A Canadian soccer player, the best of all time.
I think that's what we're probably most proud of, that we were able to deliver a message to the world, led by herself, that she's Canadian, and a Canadian did this to be the leading goal scorer. And if anybody deserves it, she deserves it, because she's the most humble athlete I've ever met, and the most genuine, to be honest. Certainly a sincere appreciation for the person that she is. She's an outstanding person and a significant role model for our women's program and leader. And I know in her, there's more to do. It may not necessarily be just on the pitch. And I think it's our job, incumbent upon us, and I'll take it upon myself, to work with her to see what her role will be moving forward, as well as on the pitch, but more importantly, off the pitch. If it's a player coach, or if it's some type of program where she's leading our country into something that's genuine and has a purpose for Christine Sinclair.
Just the last thought of the women's program before we move on. I think it's so cool that a lot of the women that have played in this generation, whether it be Karina LeBlanc, Rianne Wilkinson, Robin Gale, Carmelina Moscato, they're all staying within the game and making the women's game a better place. I mean, I think that speaks volumes about the collective group that kind of saw their way through this generation to great acclaim.
Yeah, thank you for that. Last summer, where we were in France for the World Cup, Robin is part of our staff. Rianne Wilkinson was part of our staff. Melissa Tancredi is part of our staff as a chiropractor. Karina LeBlanc was there for CONCACAF. Carmelina was there at that time with TSN. And I think I was sitting back and just most proud to see how we've had women leading women and the continuation of the legacy and keeping them in the game. I don't know if it's always been that way, Gareth. I was proud just to look at what Canada Soccer and our coaching staff were able to deliver and keep that engine going where they stay within the game, stay within the game. It's really important, really important.
So we just celebrated the 5-year anniversary of the women's tournament. I mentioned it a few moments ago. We're just celebrated the 2-year anniversary of Canada being part of the winning United bid to host 2026. You and Stephen Reed and Victor Montopoli, you had your fingerprints all over this baby. I still remember vividly watching as the announcement was made. I was looking at you on stage. You're every shade of blue, red, and everything in between, riding the wave of emotion. What was it like being on that stage in Moscow that night? Did you know it was a slam dunk? Did you know that it was
No,
coming your way? Or were there
no,
seeds of doubt planted?
no, you never know. I mean, we put in a great effort over the 2 years putting it together. And then we had an international relations campaign where we literally traveled all over the world for 2 months. But then when you arrive in Moscow, you start all over again, as Victor liked to say, and you go see everybody once again. And so you're in the hotel lobbies and you're hearing people say something you didn't hear them say when you went to meet them in Luxembourg or Belgium. And you go, well, wait a second, that's not what you said to me there. And so you start over again and you're spinning. So you're never really sure. And you're there competing against another country that they're saying things. And we just knew that the spirit of unity, certainty, and opportunity was something that was genuine for the people, and they really believed it. And so I felt, we had the best bid, and I knew that the best bid would win if the rational people were looking at it from a rational perspective.
I'm doing renovations right now in front of my house, but I have to deal with my neighbors at the same time because all of our units are adjoined. So obviously, your work had to coincide with cooperation with not only Mexico, but the United States as well. And it's going to continue to play out that way. How difficult is that? Because oftentimes you can take care of your own message, take care of what's going on in your own backyard. But once you go outside of that realm, it becomes that much more difficult.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot of untold stories, but we're the good ambassador between the two of them because, on the pitch, you know how they are. They're fierce competitors. Here's the way I like to say it, and this is true, really, and made me extremely proud to be Canadian. When we were in pitching all the countries, and some of them we would pitch as a collective, as some we could pitch them as a collective group. Some we would pitch individually and go to visit them individually. And when we spoke to them, this is what you always heard back. You heard them say to Mexico, "We want to talk to you about football. You're football. How can we learn from you about football?" We understood that. They also said to the United States, "You know what? We want to talk about your dollars. How does this dollars translate into a greater success of the Men's World Cup? How does this help Ukraine? How does this help our country? This and that." And I think we were able to articulate that. And that made sense because of the size of the stadiums in the United States. But this is the part that really got me, Gareth. When they looked at me or our representatives from Canada, they would always say, "Peter, I want to tell you this. I have a friend, I have a relative, and they live in Canada. And I like those two other countries, but I'm coming to Canada to see my friends because I love your country." Now, how does that make you feel? They're selling us on our country, and we're there to be the peacemaker for everybody. And what it meant was that really everybody loves Canada. And it made you feel greater about what we were always saying about ourselves as a country, that we're a welcoming country. Now, we said that all the time. The people who were selling that was Victor Montopoli, Steve Reed, Sandra Gage, and myself. But we meant it, and we knew it, and we felt it. But to hear that on the other side, for them to say, "We love your country," and of those countries, we're coming to Canada first because we love you and we love the people that are there, made you feel special. And it made you feel real that our country is something special globally.
We don't have time to get into the minutia of it, but I encourage anyone that's interested about how that bid played out. Yourself and Victor and Steve joined Jason DeVos on his podcast. It's episode 7. Follow Canada Soccer. Have a listen. It's a great hour behind the scenes. What went into that bid by 3 individuals who were integral to the winning United bid. I still think about on stage. You went over, you hugged Steve Reed, Canada Soccer president. There was a group, but then you immediately went to your right and you gave a big hug to Alphonso Davies. And he's come a long way in 2 years. He spoke wonderfully ahead of the winning bid being announced. I know there's a lot of pride in him, but his game has just taken off. I think that's pretty cool that you went right over to someone who's likely to be the face of Canadian soccer for the foreseeable future.
Wasn't he special for that presentation? He was just electric when he smiled and said, "I'm Alphonso Davies," and then took us through his journey. It was magnificent, but it resonated because, well, it's true, and that's who we are as Canadian, as welcoming. And he was the perfect spokesperson who really literally sold that bid not only to the delegates, but he sold it to the world and the people that were watching. And it's a vivid memory in my mind, watching it, to see him on the huge FIFA screen, to say this is magnificent and this bid will win because of that presentation. And to see what he's done now, he's a special person. He really is a genuine and very special person. We're very lucky to have him as part of
I
the
mean,
Canada Soccer family.
the men's program has had some great players come through and really good ambassadors of the game. But can you compare Alphonso to anyone? I mean, the men's program has been screaming out for their own Christine Sinclair, and Alphonso's a different type of player. But boy, oh boy, his
Well,
popularity, not only in terms of his persona, but his play as well, it ticks all the
yeah,
boxes.
it ticks all the boxes. I think it's a different world now. You know, for Atiba could be, it still is that player, but we haven't had that opportunity to actually see it, unfortunately, here in Canada, and that's been the biggest difference. Now these games are televised globally, right? And they're televised here in Canada. And so you get to see every Bayern Munich match and you want to see that match. And I think that's the difference now. People are ingrained to watch international club football, where maybe historically it wasn't as much. And now that's the difference where the sport has grown. I think this journey of this discussion you and I have had is how the sport has grown from 2007 to where it is now, where we're talking about a great young player who's Canadian playing at Bayern Munich, who the Canadian public actually get to see play and star, whether it be through social media or whether it be on TV.
It's a great segue into where we go from here. And I think I've told you this in the past. The one thing I've always wanted more to sell the Canadian game is more Canada men's games here on home soil. I think you saw the response of the Canada win over the United States last fall. That's prime example. I mean, that
Yeah.
reached all walks of, that was a water cooler conversation, not only among sports fans, but just Canadians. Is there going to be a clear approach here to have more Canadian games on home soil so we can take full advantage of Alphonso and Jonathan David and John Herdman and everyone involved, the popularity that can really follow this group heading into 2026?
Absolutely. And that was just a small indication, but wasn't that special that night in October at BMO Field, the National Soccer Stadium, where we did something that very few people thought we could do, but we knew we could do it. They knew they could do it. They just had to do it. And it was special because it was against the United States. Yes, there's a commitment to be playing. You know, let's understand this, once COVID's over, I mean, playing at home and there's no fans and that, it's one thing, but we need that energy. We need that building. We need the energy of the place being full. That's our commitment at Canada Soccer. We have been dictated to, and this is not a negative, Gareth, by playing in CONCACAF competitions. And those competitions are pre-assigned countries we're playing against. So that idea of friendlies has gone away to a certain extent. And we're playing at home because we need to do this match for points, or we need the Nations League away match because that's what's told to us. We have to find that balance where we're playing at home more often, and it's not necessarily only CONCACAF, where we can try and bring in other pieces to the world and the globe. But we certainly want to play those CONCACAF countries because that's where it is that we're either qualifying through or working through various competitions.
Well, unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, we missed out on the opportunity to see games in Langford, British Columbia, West Hills, which would have been really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
BMO Field's a special place. It's a national soccer stadium. There's business interests, obviously, in Toronto as well. But is there going to be a push to kind of expand and make sure places like Langford and
Oh
great
yeah,
Canadian
sure.
Premier League city host
Sure.
national team games as well?
Sure, absolutely. There's no reason why we wouldn't. Don't forget, on the women's side, we've played in Hamilton, we've played in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
In Winnipeg, we had 32,000 people on the women's side, and we sold out Tim Hortons Field twice in Hamilton for the women's national team. So we have a commitment. We're going to be playing across the country, absolutely.
I believe it was the week that really the pandemic hit home. Was it a FIFA delegation came to meet in Toronto and
Correct.
meet with potential host cities? I know Montreal, Edmonton, and Toronto were all involved in that conversation. How did that go, Peter? And like, how much work is required by these host cities in terms of the stadiums, their current state, in order to bring them up to the standard where they will be a lock to host World Cup games come 2026?
Well, it's a good question. I could take a couple hours to answer that, but we did have that meeting, and it was very well received by FIFA and the three candidate host cities of Montreal, Toronto, and Edmonton. And there's a significant amount of work that's required in each one of those venues to bring it up to FIFA standard. But as we've proven before, we as a country can do this. And when we're hosting the Men's World Cup in 2026, and we will have hosted all the FIFA events there are, youth, senior, male, female, not talking futsal or beach, but the main World Cup ones. So certainly we have a tremendous history in our country, and we have 6+ years to put it together. So there's a significant amount of work that we're committed to with those three cities to put it together.
So you're confident all three cities will meet the standards required?
I'm confident. Yes, it's going to take some effort, certainly over the next 12 months, to put the plans in place, Gareth. But I'm confident that all three can. Yes.
And because of the unknown and because of the delay to regularly scheduled programming right now, does it open the door for the likes of Vancouver to come back in? I know I still look back in 2015. I live in Toronto. I'm a Torontonian. I thought it was just such a massive miss by the city of Toronto not to host Women's World Cup games because of the Pan Am Games. I know probably behind closed doors they tell you it was a mistake, Peter. I would just hate to see a great Canadian city and a city that played host to the finals of the 2015 Women's World Cup to miss out on the men's experience as well.
I knew you were going to ask me. I'm not sure what you're asking me, but I will say that in a lot of ways it's in the hands of FIFA. In that regard, for official host cities, I have to remind everybody we're at 23. We need to go down to 16. And those cities are predominantly in United States, where they have too many cities that they're going to have to cut back down to 10. So in saying that, we want to keep 3 candidate host cities and make them become official. But it really is a decision taken by FIFA. It's not a decision taken by the Mexican Federation, U.S. Soccer, and Canada Soccer. All we can do is position our cities as the best possible way to meet the FIFA tick marks and say they qualified. That's the best we can do. It's up to FIFA to tell us otherwise.
And the aim is still to have 10 games in Canada, correct?
It's still the aim. I'll keep on asking Victor for more and more, but at this point in time, it's 10. Yes.
If they decide, maybe only 2 Canadian cities fit the bill. I don't know if that's even in the conversation. Would that number kind of still hold true, or does each venue, are they limited to the amount of games that they can host?
No, you know what? Still too early to tell.
Okay.
I've been in a World Cup where we've hosted 6 or 7 matches at a stadium. In Germany, I was in Hamburg in 2006, and we hosted. I thought it was 7 matches. So it's possible. I mean, there's no magic number there. So we'll see. 5 at each venue is certainly more than accommodating.
Yeah, it's exciting. A lot of work to do. Has anything changed in terms of timelines because of the pandemic? Has anything been pushed back at
Yeah,
all?
probably the delay in naming the official host cities is a little delayed. I think in the ramp up to that, I think we're all delayed to a certain extent. We were to have some opportunities to be engaged with FIFA where they're visiting each one of the cities. That's delayed.
Mhm.
So that whole part would be delayed, but it doesn't mean anything's delayed in terms of the actual event itself or the execution of leading up.
Yeah. Obviously, 2022 is coming up pretty quickly, and the qualification for that tournament has changed. We had the qualification process is likely going to have to change because of all this based upon time, which may open the door for Canada to qualify in the tournament in a different way. How involved is the Canadian Soccer Association in those conversations, in the brainstorming of it all?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from the CONCACAF Council. They're mandated to make the decisions for CONCACAF. In turn, it's relayed up to the FIFA Council. And as we know, they're meeting this week to make certain decisions. I like to think that those decisions are on the table as far as where World Cup qualification will lead to. I'm hoping that the hex is a little different. It's a little different concept, and that we're back in the mix. And we'll wait to hear in the next few days from FIFA and CONCACAF what their decisions would be. But those decisions are very imminent, Gareth, and we would support changes to it.
Right. So yeah, I know that FIFA, I believe on Thursday, are going to have a discussion about what international football looks like coming out of this. Is there confidence amongst the conversations you've had thus far that we're not too far off, that there will be a plan in place
Well,
to make sure that the international calendar still is able to play out in a functional way?
yeah. So the advantage is, and I'm sure Victor took you through this, is that because 2022 is in December, thank God that decision was made that it was December.
Right.
So we have an extra half a year, so to speak, that allows us the opportunity to qualify. So I'm hoping that they find the opportunity to find the FIFA windows that are required in order to re-engineer the qualification process. Obviously, that's of prime importance for almost all the countries, especially all the CONCACAF countries. And I know Victor and his team have worked very, very hard to find the appropriate solution.
I mean, qualifying for 2022 just would be just such a shot in the arm for this country. Can you monetize what kind of impact it would have if Canada
Well,
did actually qualify, or or
it's hard to say. You know, it takes that idea of culturally what I mentioned: people buying a ticket to go watch soccer, people filling up a stadium, and then wearing a red jersey. Take that to the next level of what that means. Who knows? It's filling our stadiums across the country for soccer at all times. It's something that's very difficult to quantify, but something that we do need to get to.
I mean, hosting 26. I don't know if there's anything that can compare to that, but I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the host countries will receive an automatic bid. I'm assuming that Canada will play in 2026. Has that been decided yet?
You know what? I I believe that we will be, but we haven't had that put pen to paper at this point in time. However, you know, there is the part that it's difficult for us to make the sales pitch to governments if we're not playing in it. So you know, that's something that we're optimistic of for sure.
I've heard Victor speak about that multiple times, the business of the game and how it's important to have Bay Street and the big figures come on board and not only support the program, but support soccer in this nation in general, and the professionalism of it all. And that's where the Canadian Premier League comes into play, building up an industry. Do you feel that things are moving in the right direction? I mean,
Absolutely.
you're intimately connected to all this. Is there greater interest among the business community to get involved in the game?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, taking you through that journey from 2007 to where it is now, it's night and day. When I started, the idea, Gareth, was that soccer in Canada is the largest participation team sport in Canada. It's all great. It's fantastic. But that's all we relied on, was the largest team participation sport in Canada. It wasn't enough. It didn't have a backbone. And that's why we've been bidding for this event, to allow it to have a backbone for people to see it, feel it, touch it, to understand it. And I think we're there now. And the introduction of CPL is a brilliant idea of Victor and the people who are running it to give an industry behind it on the professional level. Now, it's not to say that the three MLS teams are not an industry unto themselves. They've done a wonderful job, and they're just taking it at a different level. They're part of a different league. But it's still 11 professional clubs. And before 2007, Gareth, I'll ask you, how many professional clubs did you feel we had? Yeah, we had some, but really
Semi-professional, yeah.
Okay,
Let's
yeah,
underline that word professional. You're right. Before 2007, it was touch and go. And now you have the three MLS teams, you have the 8 Canadian Premier League teams. I always say the biggest difficulty for Canadian soccer has always been geography,
right,
climate, and dollars.
right.
And all of them are intrinsically linked in a way, but 8 professional teams, the Canadian Premier League could probably get up to 12 or 14. Then you really have a business coast to coast to coast, don't you?
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily about quantity. It's obviously we want more. It's great. More playing opportunities for Canadians. I mean, that's why Canada Soccer is part of the league and investing in the league. But it's the quality of. And I was, seeing you after that first match in Hamilton, how we talked after the match of the quality of the
Yeah.
match. It was a brilliant match. And I don't want to say any one of us were surprised. We were happy at the quality of the match and carrying that through the entire season. And let's see that now producing national team athletes at the youth level, at the Olympic level, and then at the senior national level. That's where we need to get to with the league. I'm not saying it's going to happen today. The league is sincere in that as well. They're doing a great job. It's more of that. So it's the quality, not necessarily more quantity. It's the quality of.
We just have a few minutes left. I mean, I think we were all impressed in the way year one of the CPL played out. We're waiting to see what year two looks like in some shape or form. How involved is the CSA in the decision making process about a Canadian Premier League season? And are we any closer to there being a formal announcement when that will take place?
Yes. So on our end, Joe Guest has been heavily involved with the CPL, but more so on the part of how it plays out with health protocols to make sure it meets Canada soccer standards and working through our approval system. We're understanding of where CPL wishes to go in terms of how the league is looking for this year. I think they're getting closer and closer to a decision. And as part of that, we'd like to think we're getting closer and closer to a decision as far as the Canadian Championships, which will involve the CPL teams and will involve the 3 MLS teams. So it's a bit of a wait and see to determine how each league is configured. We've learned a little more from MLS. I think we'll learn soon from CPL, and then we can build the Canadian Championships off that. It'll be different. It's not going to be the same, but we're optimistic that we can hold the Canadian Championship in 2020.
Yeah, but yeah, different doesn't necessarily mean it will be a negative experience. I have full faith in One Soccer, the Canadian Soccer Association, the CPL, and the MLS clubs to come together and come up with a real entertaining solution with the 11 teams that are playing for obvious reasons. But how difficult is it to coordinate what that's going to
Well,
look like based upon the MLS moving targets in terms of their schedule coming up after the tournament and any planning when it comes to the CPL season as
yeah,
well?
it's very difficult because you're planning on something you don't know can happen. On paper, it looks like it can happen, but you can only get to the next stage when the first stage is done, and we're still waiting for that to occur. So the plans are in place, we're developing them, but we need that first ball to drop, and then you can start planning the next evolution of.
Right. I mean, thankfully, this country, we moved in the positive direction. Our full credit to our healthcare providers and administrators for moving people forward in a much safer way. I've always felt like it might actually be easier to host events in this country than our friends to the south. But obviously, it comes with its own complexities. Is there a timeline on your behalf that a decision must be made in order to go ahead with a season?
You're talking the CPL
We'll
season?
see, or a Canadian championship,
Yeah.
because the intention is understanding that anything can happen, things can change in terms of the way the pandemic plays out. But is there a rough timeline that you have?
Well, I think we're still, waiting to see how the CPL is moving forward. Um, and once that decision is taken and made, then it's easier for us. I don't know if we have a definitive timeline. Like I can mention that yesterday
Right.
we did announce that the national championships, which are club championships, will no longer be. That was understandable because it's required as a playoff system to get to there, where our member associations, and we needed to advise them that the national championships would not be occurring. So there was a definitive timeline. I think we're still open. I don't think we have a hard set date, because we're still waiting to see anything developing on the CPL side.
But Peter, just finally, it's a real intriguing, real exciting time to be involved in Canadian soccer because of all the positive moving pieces. A new league, the women's program, seeing where they go from here. Alphonso Davies, the success that John Herdman is bringing to the men's program. But for the Canadian Soccer Association right now, where are your priorities at? Where is your focus beyond, making sure that everything's dealt with in an appropriate way during this pandemic, but longer term, where are the priorities for the Canadian Soccer Association?
Well, the investments are made on the pitch, and the investments are made on national teams and coaching development. And we've got to continue to develop, as well as have success at the national team level. And I'm not just speaking at the senior team, certainly at the youth level. I think over the last 10 years, we made that transition to be internationally respected at the CONCACAF and FIFA level. That's solid. That's there, especially with Victor as the CONCACAF president. I think it's now we need to everyone to have our house in order and have national team success continued on the women's side, continued investment on the women's side, but principally men's national team success. And I think the more success you hit on earlier on the men's team, the more success soccer has in our country. Just look at Alphonso Davies. Look at it, that idea of beating the United States. The more success we have there brings our sport, that platform, grow to another level.
I mean, so much has been accomplished in your 12 years as general secretary. Do you feel like the foundation is now stable, that heavy lifting is done, and now you start building on that foundation? Like, what's your personal approach? Is there things more or less difficult right now than they were before?
Well, they're less difficult because our budgets are greater, that's for sure. But with greater budgets, you have more responsibility and more accountability, to be honest with you. So it comes, both ways. I think what we want to do is secure opportunities for everyone in our sport to be successful. And I think we're better today than we've ever been before.
Awesome. This has been great, Peter. It's so great to catch up. We haven't chatted for quite some time. Good to see your face. I'm so happy that you and yours have remained healthy during this period of time. And now all we need is Canadian football back. Proper Canadian
100%.
soccer.
100%. Thank you, Gareth. It's always a pleasure to be with you. You're doing some outstanding work day in, day out, even though we're not on the pitch. I like listening to you on the pitch. I enjoyed our hour together. Thank you very much. You were great.
Thank you so much, Peter. And hopefully we'll be hearing you and your contemporaries make some announcements in the near future.
Fantastic.
The Canadian soccer fans cannot wait. Cheers. Thank you to Peter Montopoli for joining us, Canada Soccer General Secretary. Thank you to Richard Scott as well from the CSA for helping make arrangements. I want to thank my producer, David, Armin, as always, and from the entire One Soccer team. I am Gareth Wheeler. This has been episode 23 of Inside the Game. We'll chat to you next week where I'll be a 40-year-old. Oh my gosh, 40. In the meantime, stay home and stay safe.